Hello everyone, welcome to my first Silverlight 4 application tutorial. I'm going to start off with just showing basics of just kind of how to start an application and show around a little bit what things do, and we'll take it from there. This is also my first YouTube application tutorial, or actually tutorial at all, so please bear with me if I stutter a little bit. Please ignore it. I'm sure it'll get better as it goes. And you might hear a little bell in the background a little bit on and off. That's my dog Curtis. So he doesn't like to sit still when I tell him to sit still. So that's probably what you might hear in the background every once in a while. So first off, let me just start by saying the newest Silverlight as of this tutorial is 4.0. I'm going to be using Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate. You can easily do any of these tutorials I'll be doing with with Visual Studio Express or any other version that supports Silverlight 4. So let's start by clicking New Project. Okay. And I'm assuming that you've already installed the Silverlight release candidate, which includes not only plugins but all the SDK information, and also it installs all these nice little starter kits for or templates for Visual Studio. The one we're going to start with is Silverlight application. The business application is nice if you're doing canned stuff. I particularly don't care for it, only because it kind of hinders you from doing a lot of your own stuff, and you really are relied on what they call RAD, or Rapid Application Development, as opposed to designing your own abstract and custom tools and user controls and all that kind of fancy stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is click Silverlight application. Okay, as we go through other tutorials, I'm sure we'll go through a lot of these other ones. I'm going to name this first YouTube. Oops, if I could spell YouTube. Okay, and I'm just gonna take that and put that under projects, and we will click OK. Alright, now this is gonna create a directory for a solution. You don't have to worry about adding source control. That's something completely different if you're working with multiple developers and you're all trying to work off of the same basic solution, and each one of you takes a piece of the code and alters it. So I'm going to click OK, and this is going to ask you one more question. It's going to ask you, do you want to host your Silverlight application in a new website? I would always recommend to say yes, and you can rename this to whatever you want, but I would keep the .web so that you can differentiate the two projects, and I'll show you why in a minute. The new project should always be ASP.NET Web Application Project, and the Silverlight version should be 4. You can choose 3 if you have that SDK. If you're familiar with some of Silverlight, that's fine. And I would always recommend you to enable WCF RIA services. As we get farther down the tutorials, I'll be going over what WCF RIA services is and how to use it. But I would get in the habit of using it, because enabling it afterwards, I believe as of 2010 Studio, at least in the Ultimate Edition, the properties of the solution, I believe you can add to enable it, but I would enable it here anyway, just because if you're using a different version of Studio, you may or may not have it. I'm not sure. I'm not up to date on the older versions. So anyways, just check. Long story short, just check that and click OK. And it's working on it. Alright, so first thing you're going to see here is you're going to see a design view. If you've used any other Visual Studio in the past for something like ASP or Windows Forms or Dreamweaver even, you usually have a design view and a code view. Okay, your design view is on top in this case. You can move things around, move your tabs around. They let you dock in different places, but this is a good way to start. and then you have your code view in this case for XAML. I know XAML and it's called XAML. Well, you're going to love this because actually the actual file that's used when you build the project will actually come in as what they call a ZAP file, but it's .xap is the extension. So go figure that one out. But in any case, that's what it will be called when you look it up. People pronounce it that way if it's in a tutorial. So you might as well get used to it now. So as with most Visual Studio applications, you have all these controls here that you can copy and paste, drag and drop them in, move them around, all that good stuff, and it'll auto-populate in your XAML. Alright, you're going to see as you go forth and you start doing things more and more, you're going to see that the margin kind of messes with your code a little bit, so there's going to be times that you're not going to want to drag and drop and you'll do coding on what they call the code behind. Okay, so I'll just hit Control-Z twice and I undid that. You'll also notice that if I were to code in here, you have a nice little what they call IntelliSense within Visual Studio. Okay, and you can give it. I'm making a button right now. Okay, and we'll do text. Was it text to content? Content. Test button. Okay, and we'll close it. It'll actually close that for you. Now, I didn't give it a width or a height, but you notice that the XAML updated right away for you. Okay, and then what I can do now is I can shrink it, and it's going to give a nice little margin here of where it's going to be. Okay, and it'll relate to how you made it. Okay, so just to show you kind of the basics of how you can use the XAML and the XAML and the design at the same time. Okay, you'll notice over to here where I was telling you about needing the .web. The reason you need .web, or why I would recommend it, even if you name it something different, I would still call it .web, because both of these, if you don't look right at these little images right here, you're not going to realize that one's the web and one's the Silverlight, okay, until you get used to it. So the best way is just to have a .web extension, and then you can see it right away which one you happen to be under. Because you're going to have files under here, you're going to have files under here, it's all going to depend on what you're doing. One thing I wanted to make also note of was that this visual, or this, when you make the web application, you actually have two files here. One's an ASPX file, one's an HTML file. The ASPX, they both work interchangeably. The only thing you have to do is make sure that when you are going to use one, use that one. Okay. If you double click on this, I'll show you why you would want to edit this. There's a lot of stuff in here you'll notice that you don't want to touch, like you don't really need to touch this style unless you're going to change the body width of it, which actually can be changed lower. I would not recommend changing really any of the JavaScript unless you want specific error codes. But even then, you can do error codes and other things, which we'll go over much more in depth in later tutorials. One of the things that I wanted to show you was right in here. You'll see, if you've ever done any ASP, you have your form ID here, and it's actually making a form tag and a run at server time. So this form tag is actually going to run at load or design time, and you're going to have inside of it an object tag. And this object tag is going to reference your ZAP file. Okay, first youtube.zap. Now you might ask, well, it says it's in client bin, and it says it's in, but if you look here, it's not there, right? Even if you do a show all files, it's not showing up yet. Well, if you'll notice down here, there's a warning. The warning says the first youtube.web.cs project, which means it's a C# project. I do all my projects in C#. I know Visual Basic a little bit as well, but I just prefer Visual C#. Project must be built before client proxy classes can be generated. So what this means is you have to build your solution or build your project before that file will be created. And when that file is created, it compiles all this stuff that you put up here into that ZAP file and puts it in here so that your web page can display it. And that's really bottom line how Silverlight runs. Alright, so if I do a build here, you're going to notice that this goes away. Build succeeded, warning goes away, and you'll notice your zap file there. Well, I'm running just about out of time at this point, so I'm going to pause this now, and we will go over some more of the code and how to add different controls in a later tutorial. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.